decided, it's randomly decided, and you co-create and co-lead some delivery together. And when I was working in preparation on our co-delivery, I worked also with Joss and John, and they actually run something called the Parachute Project that has managed to support so many co-leaders over a number of years. And so they've been business partners for around 13 years now, and they started to co-lead together way back in 2013. They've also created support in terms of 4 sessions of co-coaching conversations to help emerging co-leaders to kickstart their projects, jump in the deep end and co-create together. They've also got backgrounds in engineering, transformative neuroscience, project management, of course, coaching, application development, franchise management, infrastructure design, book editing, and lots more. And they've both got connections with Manchester, where I was born. So that was an interesting thing we all discovered. Co-leading remains the mainstay of their business approach, and they both live with their respective spouses in Canada right now. So, thank you for joining us. We've had a few sessions together to look at what we want to do today, which is not a curriculum, it is not training, it is an iterative roadmap that we are going to have questions and then discussion, generative thinking, as well as some breakouts where, when we all come back together, we can learn from each other's experiences. So, Joss and John, would you like to say a few words as we get started?
But of course.
Because I've said too many.
Will you be counting, or are you going to take this off the record when we're done? I've
Totally
just been
your
away
choice.
on holiday, and I just had the most amazing reconnection with my co-lead partner here, Joss, talking about things that take us back almost into childhood, because I'm in England right now visiting my family. It's such a delight to reconnect. Of course, Joss and I usually talk at least 3 times a week, if not more. But there is something different about being able to talk with her from this space of the UK and where I grew up. I think this is going to be a very special event today of us bringing ourselves into this new space. Your turn, Joss.
Oh, well, I really don't know what to say. I'm very happy to be here and really delighted with the invitation for being able to be in a generative conversation about co-leading, because my experience over the years has been, it is very much an evolving ability. You know, you get better at it and you learn more things about yourself, and then you get better at it and you keep changing it and morphing it. So what I love about it is that there's no one way to co-lead. There's your way, your partner's way, and whatever you can make up that serves the purpose of what you're co-leading about. So yeah, quite excited to be here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's jump straight in then. So maybe a good place to start is, together, what is your sort of definition of co-leading?
Are you asking us?
I am.
Oh, ooh. As of today, the definition is, and it's subject to change, because it's, how can I generalize this for everybody we co-lead with? Because almost everything we do in life, if you think about it, if you're not shut away as a hermit somewhere, is a form of co-leading. And I think one of the most important elements of co-leading, as I think about it here today, it's not about you. It's about creating space for your co-lead partner to be them. And if you both hold that view of what co-leading is about, then you actually have a lot more freedom yourself to co-lead than you would have if you were trying to make the rules about it yourself. Well, that's kind of where I'd start today.
Mm. I like to think of, we used to use this a lot in the Parachute Project conversations as a definition of what your purpose with your partner is, beyond what it is that you're presenting or working on or doing together, is to be the black velvet to your partner's diamond. And you're both committed to that equally, so that you're having your partner is not wrong in what they're doing. You might need to move them around a little bit, especially if they're speaking too much or taking your project in a direction that it doesn't need to go at this particular point. You need to be able to pull them back, but it's always to do it in a way that polishes the partner. And they're doing the same for you. So it becomes a real dance of what's the energy shift between you, and how do you want to handle that in service of whatever it is that you are actually presenting.
And Joss, in terms of what we're all presenting together and creating together this evening, I know you talked when we had a chat about emotional states. Would you like to share that with the group, and maybe we go there next?
Yeah, I think that very much we're in the world of neuroscience. There's the various ways that you can be in fear, you can be in competition, and you can be in that state of graceful acceptance of whatever is happening. And on a day-to-day basis, we come into things with any kind of level of energy or emotional state. So if you're going to come to a call like this, for example, and you're agitated because something has happened before you got here, you have to remember that what has happened is actually going to bleed into the space. So you either have to be really clear about it for yourself and with your partner before you start, or be really clear about it with the group that you're presenting to, so that they are aware of what is happening. You don't have to tell the story. You can say, I'm really impacted. My cat's really sick and my mind is partly, in concern for a loved one. And that's enough to let people know where you are. So we bring our emotions to it. We can't sort of shut them off. It's like that old adage of, oh yes, leave your home life at, when you walk to work and you get to work, leave your home life behind. Well, if you're a human being, that's impossible. So, let's not pretend that that's what you have to do. You bring everything, your 100%, whatever it is.
Should we ask everyone to maybe just have a think for a few minutes and type in the chat, or even share, because we're a nice cozy number, what your emotional state is right now? I'll give you a few seconds.
Yeah. So I have this practice that I do in mornings that to bring the emotional state up front in the morning, when we choose our perfume or clothes. So, and I usually put it in a statement such as, all over the place like Tasmanian, or fast as a tornado. So it's a statement that I keep in the morning. So today I feel like smooth, like a good protein shake. That's my state of mind.
Oh, nice. I love that, creating a metaphor for yourself, for your energy.
That sounds like that sounds like actually a very creative way of bringing people on board in a co-creation space like this is what is the metaphor that describes you in this moment without thinking you have to get it right for anything longer than just that microsecond when you write it down. Because you're not the same person 5 seconds later, 30 seconds later. And this is another thing about co-leading that comes to me is that the person you are co-leading with is not the same person from moment to moment, just as you aren't yourself. And being aware of that and sensitive to that and open to that and going with that in whatever direction it takes you, rather than the one that you think you ought to be doing because half an hour ago you decided that this was what you're going to do, but things are different and your world is different and the people in the space are different. And I think one of the really great elements of co-leading is that being willing to shift and turn and play with what comes up rather than wish it was something different or let's put it back to where it was, because you can't. So don't even try.
Well, John, as you say that, I think it makes me think about the work that goes into co-leading, because when we talk about it, because it can be a very joyful experience and you think, oh, well, I should be able to do that. But there's always a lot of pre-work that goes on before you do a presentation or you co-lead with somebody or you co-coach. And part of that, of course, is sharing with your partner where you're at, and that I had this thing happen, or I'm feeling distracted, or I really don't like the way you put that spreadsheet together and I don't understand what the hell you're talking about. Conversations. You need to have those before that, and that's part of the work for preparing for a co-lead event, is to be upfront about that and to talk about those things. And you're doing it with, now, you might not like the person you co-lead with, because that does happen. I've co-led with people that I don't necessarily like as people, but it's not the point. The point is the leadership part. How do I turn up as a leader with this person that I don't necessarily like? I love co-leading with people I really enjoy, because that's a different relationship. But if you have to co-lead with somebody you've never co-led with before, that's a whole other thing. So the conversations need to happen beforehand, and you need to be able to be vulnerable and to invite vulnerability from that other person. It's another aspect of co-leading that we don't often talk about.
Yeah, that's actually, that's really interesting that you sort of take me back to that. And of course, I have to confess that having co-led with you so many times, it's something that it's in danger of being taken for granted. The idea, the basic question that you would always ask if you're co-leading with somebody for the first time is, who is this person? Just perhaps a subtle change, but somebody that you've co-led with many times over a long period of time, for example, as Joss and I have, there is always that question, who is this person today? Who is this person right now? What assumptions might I be in danger of making that they are the way that was convenient last time? And there's something else in the space now that as a co-leader, I need to be aware of and allow for, but it's not the subject of our co-leading, it's a contribution to the way that we co-lead.
Carla asked this great question. Having been there, how do you know that there were sufficient conversations? And it is a great question. And I think it's one of those that you have to be able to even ask your partner. Have we spoken enough about this? Is this resolved? And if you feel that you're not ready, or that you're between the two of you, you have to actually say that. I don't feel I'm complete yet for us to get started. So rather than go for that completion, say, I don't feel complete, but this is what I'm willing to go with. And sometimes 100% isn't us completely all in, gloriously engaged. Sometimes it's 50%, and but we're going to give all of it. So that your 50% then becomes your 100% present to what's happening, even though you know that in some areas you're holding back because you're not certain. And again, part of the dance.
I love it. And what I'm thinking back to the first time I was co-leading, and I'm sort of thinking, all sorts of emotions and popcorn and yay and all sorts of things. when you two were first co-leading, what was that like?
Okay, so John, you can tell a story of the in-between project, but
but
because
this is such a
But-
shows such a difference between us, because the first time we co-led, of course, myself being an engineer, it was all about logistics and getting it right and making sure that the projector worked, and did we have the slides, and were the people going to show up, and all of this irrelevant stuff that had nothing to do with how Joss and I were going to work together. And I'm going to steal this piece anyway, because I just love to say this. 3/4 of the way through our first co-lead, Joss picked up the script and threw it on the floor. That, I think, was probably the moment at which we decided that this might be worth something that we could learn from one another if we were willing to be ourselves, and let go of all of the mechanics of where we started and actually deal with what was present. And I think it was actually 12 years ago that experience, 12 and a half years ago that happened. And yeah, I think we still both chuckle at that experience, but it's very much about who's here, what's important. And no, the logistics and the stuff is not what it's about. It's who are you willing to be, and how do you create from what is actually present right here. And heaven help you if you ever think you're going to have to get it right, because that is a definite no-no. Do not try to get it right. Just try to get it wonderful.
Yeah. It's funny that in retrospect, looking back at that particular time, I know that when we were designing our co-lead for that particular project, I was, holding back, waiting for John to show up the way I thought he should show up, which was got nothing to do with who he is whatsoever. It was my pre-assumptions about who he was and what he was bringing to the table. Plus, he was doing stuff that I wasn't interested in, spreadsheets and logistics and stuff. To me, that's maintenance. I'm not interested in maintenance. I'm much more interested in building. So I have to confess that I was actually not 100% in on our co-lead for the longest time, until the moment I threw that piece of paper on the floor. Then I was all in from there on. Because it was, for me, we were going nowhere. The emotional field was wrong. It just didn't feel right to me. And that's one of the skills that I bring to our co-lead is being able to sense an emotional field, especially in presence with other people. And I was watching people sort of like struggling to follow John's logic. And then I just suddenly just leaned right in and said, all right. And that's where we shifted the whole thing. But
yes,
so I think in that there's an acknowledgement that you have to make about what is the energy of your partner. So John and I are polar opposites in our approaches to everything. However, I rely on him for certain things, absolutely, because I know I'm not interested in them. So this is, again, something when you're co-leading effectively is to know what is your partner really, 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 really good at, and what can they bring to the table.
And one of the things,
Go ahead, John.
One of the things I love again, back to the engineer, and therefore the logic, and it has to work this way and all of that sort of thing. I love the fact that Joss doesn't think in straight lines.
Yeah. No, I don't. Yeah.
And I love the way that Samira thinks in mind maps.
I know.
Mhm.
I was just reflecting on how similar that is to our situation, Claire, here. Now, making that wonderful, when you make that wonderful and you're total opposite, what value that brings to the teams and trainees when you co-lead?
When you're polar opposites, well, I suppose if you think about other relationships in your world, and I think other relationships, they could be the personal, romantic, husband, wife, whatever, colleagues. If you start thinking about what does our co-lead actually look like in the way that we interact, in the way that we present ourselves to the world, and think about that and how different that is with different people. These are all different aspects of ourselves and different aspects of our acceptance of being with other people. That alone should tell you something about how adaptable you can be, how different you can be in a different situation or with a different person, and still a different part of yourself shows up. I'm not at all convinced that everything that we do is always a complete reflection of the total us. There are different us's that we bring into different situations and different circumstances, and that's okay. The true you, even individually, we don't necessarily really know the true ourselves in total. We can only understand ourselves in this moment and in the last 5 seconds, and maybe what we're thinking about upcoming. It's almost, if you're not in that state, I'm afraid you may be in a state of decline and decomposition. So I'm not there yet, so I don't plan to be there consciously anyway. And of course, if you have a partner that you feel the same way about, then that joy of this amazing person that you are working with, and the finding of those ways that they are amazing, just makes such a difference to what gets created and the impact that you have on other people.
Thanks for the polishing, John. So you're asking the question about what's the impact on the people who are watching. So I don't know exactly what that impact is. I can only reflect back the feedback that we get. And to me, the feedback that values is the most value is either that somebody says, you guys are amazing together, which is one piece of feedback. And the other one is, I learned so much. So it comes in two forms. So there's of course, there's the ego part of self, which really likes to hear, get the nice strokes for doing a good job and for showing up nicely and for, being authentic. Mm-hmm. And then there's what's the impact of my presence on somebody else's learning, which is essentially when you're co-leading, it's part of that co-presenting or co-coaching. Your intention is to have an impact. And so you're designing that impact to begin with. Am I intending to, push people to the brink of tearing their hair out before they get it? Or am I intending in our co-lead to dig deep into whatever is happening for somebody and have them surface something for themselves? So I think impact, you have to be really clear on what you're intending your impact to be. Mm-hmm. And then at the end, you get to measure how close you were to, how you behaved and how you presented yourself. How does that match?
Mm-hmm. And I know that some people say that they're co-leading and yet actually it's turn-taking. So what do you see as the difference between co-leading and turn-taking?
For me, I definitely think it's about, sorry, John, I cut you off there. It's definitely about the idea that if you're co-leading, you're steering the ship of what it is that you're doing. If you're turn-taking, you're basically saying, I'm on the port side and you're on the starboard side and we're going to take turns. There's nobody up front steering where this is going. So it includes saying to your partner, oops, I just stepped on you. I apologize. Or I'm going to pull you back from the edge because you're going way, way, way far off our intended pathway.
What I would add to that, it's all about what you're focusing on. As a co-leader in a turn-taking situation, you're going to be focused on what's coming next. You're going to be focusing on when is it my turn. You're going to be focusing on what do I need to be ready to say in order to transition from what they just said to what is now my turn. And for me, in true co-leading, I am in the space and aware of everything in the space all of the time, even though I may not be communicating and contributing directly. And I think one of the most important elements of that that's easy to overlook, and in fact almost doesn't happen in the turn-taking situation, is how is my partner right now? How is their energy right now? what am I noticing in the space that they may not be noticing because they're focusing on delivering. And I'm focusing as a co-leader on what else is out there that we can create from. It's almost as though turn taking is all about delivering, and co-leading and co-creating is all about what's here that we can build from. Yeah, I'll go with that for now.
Cool. Claire, I'm just thinking this would be a great spot. I think it's on the agenda, isn't it, to have a breakout?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So what if we watch you two co-create together the focus of the breakout? Because what I'm loving seeing here is just you emulating co-delivery, where one of you speaks and the other one adds to it, and there's resonance. So it's actually a fabulous demonstration of co-leading that we've got here with us.
All right. So, John, what do you think? We could make it about what do they think so far about what we've said, or have them share ideas that have been sparked about what they said and how they might want to use it. What do you feel the energy might want to be?
I'm not sure what I'm not clear on what I'm feeling in the energy, and part of that is because I know that there are people here who you know, for their personal reasons are not visible to me. So here's what the mischief in me says: let's partner them up with one person who's on video and one person who isn't, and let them talk about that. And not in any way from the point of view of criticism, but from the perspective of, yes, in this world today, we are doing a lot of our work on video conference, and it's not always convenient, appropriate, comfortable, or whatever for people to be necessarily showing exactly where they are in the space that they're in, but they want to participate anyway, and that's okay. So that's kind of what comes up for me, and I'm open to having alternatives that are even more entertaining than that one.
So well, here's what I know we do when we're actually presenting, is to say, okay, so what does the group want? What does the group feel like they would really like to do right now? And that could be as simple as they just want to check in with each other, and maybe we put in 2 or 4 groups of something. Somebody's going to have to do the leader math because I'm not, into subgroups, and sort of say, okay, so talk about what you want. What would you like to see next? And then have that come back and have that guide the rest of the presentation, and allow our co-leaders on the call to actually design something for themselves.
And I think with that, there's also the what questions have you got that, you know, you're burning to ask? That might be in the breakouts as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so Samira's kindly offered to set up.
How long?
Yes, how long? 15, 12 minutes, Claire?
10.
I think 10.
10.
9.5, Samira.
All right. All right. 10 to go.
All right, so we'll see you back.
And
So we'll just open it up to everyone. What came up in your breakouts that needs sharing with the bigger group?
We can share our thoughts if you don't mind, Claire.
Sure.
Sure, Jawahar and Mohammed also raised his hand, so that'll be next.
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I was with Claire together. We were talking about, you know, like how, and actually John was supported us actually to put a focus in the beginning. Thank you, John. It was about when you have a very short time to connect with someone that you will co-lead with that you don't know, you know, like this kind of impromptu, you know, interventions. And what if you have something like 5 to 15 minutes max, and you need to connect with this person before the co-leading exercise itself? What will be the discussion about? And I believe Claire wrote some very interesting points, putting signals when I'm engaged, not engaged, how to build on each other when I need your help, agree on some signals, and maybe add our intentions and what are we motivated to towards the system that we are working with, whether it's coaching, supervision, or facilitation. So it was, in a way, I believe it has to be very quick, and in a way there is something energetic in the trust here that we have to flow from this moment, just to be vulnerable and be in the moment at this, like somebody who's inviting you to a dance and you don't know, like a complete stranger, you have to follow some steps with. So
I like that metaphor. Being asked to dance.
By
Thinking
somebody
of the
you
tango.
don't know, and you're going to create
Yes.
that shape.
Mhm.
Lovely.
I do like that.
Great.
Thank
Who else?
you. And Joaha.
Go ahead, it's not there. She's answering a phone call, she told me.
Oh,
Okay.
right, okay.
Yeah.
Rula,
Who
would you
else
like
has-
to share?
Yeah, actually, I'm just I like actually because what we have in the small room, very quick one, we shared that that it's something very important as a life coach. We're studying as for being for our part or the client itself, and it's very important to be for being for my partner within this is coaching together, to understand by eye contact, by feelings what the other person, I'm going to jump in to talk, or I have to give the spaces, to give the trust, listening very well. It's not just just to put the outcome and leave. It's something to be sharing together for what the outcome to be for all the people around on the room, for the people around what we are talking. It's something, you just put your in with the other partner feed, like what he's feeling right now. Do I want to talk right now, or I just give the space? I just talk in the room that put the ego outside. It should not be there is an ego at all. I learned a lot, I'm studying a lot, I know much more. It's not something like that. We have to be together, melted with the same information that we are going to launch to the other people to give the outcome what both we need to put it in for the other people.
Mhm. Yes.
You use a very important word there, Rula, and it came up earlier in the chat. And it's this question of trust.
Yeah.
It's easy to get into the space of, do I trust this person? It's not so easy to get into the space of how do I need to be in order for this person to trust me? That, to my mind, is a very important part of coaching, and it's a really critical part of co-leading. Because sometimes there will be things that need to happen in the space, even more so in person than online, actually, I think, where you as a co-leader needed to take in and step in and take charge and keep everything safe. And in order to do that, you must build trust by the way that who you are and the way you behave. You can't expect other people to do it for you.
Yeah. I think that trust takes courage. I think it's one of those places where courage becomes the energy that you have to be holding. Because yes, when it's somebody you've never co-led with before, I mean, our natural tendency most often is to trust that things will be okay. And it also depends on the circumstances that you've experienced in your life as to how easy that sense comes or not. So again, for each of us, we have to be able to gauge what is my level. I'm willing to be trustworthy, but what is my level of evidence that I need from the other person that that I can trust them.
Mm.
So again, it becomes something that you have to design with that person, with your co-leader. And, you know, I've been in circumstances to say, I'm not sure that, you know, I really need you to stop me from rambling or going down a rabbit hole. And I don't trust myself not to do that. Can I trust you to pull me away? And sometimes, you know, by saying where we feel that we would be vulnerable is a way to indicate to somebody else that you are willing to trust them. Now, those kinds of conversations can feel incredibly risky, which is why I say it takes courage.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking there as well, there's quite often a parallel transference. If there's no trust between the co-lead, that will reflect in the group and vice versa.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Yes.
Fabulous supervision topic.
Yeah. So I think one of the things I think too, Claire, in our conversation, you brought up the subject of interrupting your partner, which John, I'm very good at with John less so with me. He doesn't interrupt me nearly enough.
I don't know about that. I like sometimes interrupt you when I think it's a good idea.
Yes, but you never seem to have that idea very often, which gets me worried about, you know, am I rambling too much? As you know, I'm a good talker.
Yeah, but more often than not, you do have amazing content, and it creates amazing value into the group. So you're okay. I'll try for another 13 years at least.
Yeah, but for me, I mean, I love that you say that, but for me, there's also this vulnerability feeling of, am I speaking too much? Am I losing the plot? And have I overwhelmed my partner too much that they won't interrupt me? And so for me internally, there's that sense of, am I speaking too much? And I do have to rely on my partner for that.
That brings up a great point in the co-lead, and that is understanding the difference between, I don't know where my partner's going with this, but I'm willing to give them the space because it looks as though it's creating an impact, versus yes, that they really have gone down a rabbit hole. If I'm not careful, they'll do the eat me thing and then run off and play around as Lewis Carroll's Alice used to do. And I need to bring them back. And that, yes, as Josh said, that really does take courage to make that decision and be with it, and not be perhaps on the cautious, careful side. And maybe I'm on the cautious, careful side more often than I realize. And thank you for saying that to me, Joss, because I'll get something out of that for sure.
But it's the thing, it's the subject of listening, isn't it? As was raised before, that if you're listening to what's happening, you are in a room full of people. So there is a very big difference between doing something like this, where we're on Zoom, where we have multiple inputs from our immediate environment, plus what we're seeing in front of us, plus, you know, however we feel about being in an interaction like this. Listening to what's happening in a room full of people, as well as sensing the space. What does the energy in the room feel like? Does it start to feel, you know, like it's going flat? So what do you do when it starts to go flat? You get your people doing something. You ask them to go into a breakout. You get them to speak up, or you ask them something challenging, or you point them at something and you get them to design something. Those are all the things that we do in person. And so the same happens when you're on a Zoom call. You have to do the same thing. But the interruption is a really important feature here, no matter where you are, being able to say, oh, that's a great point, John, as he's going down a rabbit hole, and say, that's a really great point. And let's come back to that. This is where we need to go. So it's developing the language about how do you interrupt somebody without making them look as if they're losing the plot. even if you think they're losing the plot, you don't want them to look like they're losing the plot. So how do you do that? And this again is about, I am willing to hold my partner as a very valuable diamond who has a lot to offer. And right now I just need to do a bit of polishing because we're not going down that rabbit hole.
I remember years back hearing as well in co-leading, always make your partner look good.
Yes.
And then to what you've been talking about there, I'm also thinking, and Samira might laugh here, those times when we actually somatically get an experience. And so we check in with our co-lead. Am I making too much of this? But we do that with the team or the group right there in front of us. So they're experiencing that conversation happen. So what makes those little tips work?
Right,
Samira?
like a secret language as well. Sometimes it's just like an eye contact, and we get it because we've done this so long, right? So it's a reflection before the sessions on understanding where we're going, what's the overall goal, and the other stakeholders' goal, you know, the organization that hired us to do that session together. So we put that in our mind as well as like a back in our mind. And then reflection in action during the session, like those few seconds, just looking at each other, just pointing like, "You're good, go ahead," or "You take next." And then, you know, doing a reflection after session, and then reflection after few sessions together. So I think peer reflection or the co-leaders do some reflections together. That added a lot of value for us as Claire and Samira. I think Ghada raised her hand and Jawahar raised her hand earlier.
Hi, I just wanted to add to this lovely conversation from personal experience as well, of how when you co-lead, it's this whole trust bit was more like, I can trust to fall on you and you can trust to fall on me when we're not completely with it. And that way we carry each other forward. That's one way of looking at it. And also experiencing it is really wonderful, especially when you're in front of a group, because you can also, and as to Claire, when she was saying, or I think, I don't remember who was saying it, but when you're trying to cover up for your partner who's probably going on a rant or going somewhere and maybe like, you know, oh, how wonderful this is. So do we want to go there, or do we want to put it on the parking lot, or should we come back to it? So sometimes thinking it out loud in front of the group together with your partner, you almost look like one person, even though you're two bodies. So the idea is to have that in mind together, like, what do we want for us as a co-leadership? What do we want for the participants? And what's the ultimate goal for the, you know, the bigger picture, the stake, what's at stake here? And if we define that in the beginning, and we kind of agree that, you know, we can redesign along the way when we have a moment, and we just signal to each other when it's the right time, then it really works out beautifully. That's, of course, having that nice connection with the person. Even if you don't know them, if you're able to step into that, it's usually very powerful.
Yeah. It reminds me, what you're saying reminds me very much of the CTI sort of one-liner that basically talks about leadership, and that is, leaders design everything.
Yes.
So if you're co-leading, you're designing everything. You're designing the room, you're designing the atmosphere, you're designing the content, you're designing the impact, you're designing your dance together, you're designing all of it.
And
so that the people who are participating just get the gift of what you've designed.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And the key element of that use of that term design is, it's not just that you design it and then it's done and now you create from that. It's that you're constantly designing all the way through the experience, both for yourself, for your partner, and for the participants. That designing just keeps on moving, and until and through the end of whatever the experience is, and even sometimes beyond that. It's an ongoing process. It's not a single thing that now it's over with. I love what you said there, Ghada. Thank you.
Thanks.
Duaha, did you want to come in now?
Yes, thank you, Claire. Actually, through what I heard a while ago and our discussion with the team, Isabel, Suzanne, and the other lady, I forgot her name, so no offense, please. Yeah, co-facilitating needs and show and demonstrate the importance of the power of presence. You can see that also in your, like, dialogue, Joe and Jose, I can see that your present is like, is very like, powerful. Being present and being aware of the visible and invisible signs with your co-facilitator and also your audience that you're facilitating the training or the coaching to, it's very important. So that's very important, and it's need actually to tango with the power of present, let's say, if we might say that. So I would like to ask a question based on our, like, a reflection that I did a while ago. Have you ever did a psychometric assessment to know actually yourself better and also your co-facilitator better? So for example, if I'm co-facilitating with Samira, and that will be an honor, I'm sure that I'm gonna, like, agree and, like, say, Samira, you will do this exercise that has lots of drawings and painting in it. And if, for example, with Claire, and that's another honor, I'm sure that Claire, you can do the theoretical part because she's excellent in theoretical part. I'm just assuming this. I don't have any result of a psychometric assessment, both of them. So this is my, like, my two part of my my reflection, the power of present, and also, do you depend on any psychometric assessment between you as a co-facilitator and the facilitator? Thank you.
Interesting question. So, John, do you have an answer that you want to bring? Because I've got one, but
I wouldn't like
have a turn.
I'm fascinated by psychometric assessments, DISC and Strength Finder and Myers-Briggs and whatever. What I would caution against is actually that use of that word depending on them. They can be fascinating, revealing characteristics of anybody, including your co-partner. But I would strongly recommend, first of all, you take the opportunity to discuss them before you even start to pay attention to them and find value in them. Discuss them and find out what your partner's view of them is. And that exploration, I find if I use them with clients, we spend a lot of our time looking at aspects of the assessment that they disagree with. And there's at least as much value in looking at what they don't agree with as finding out what it is they do agree with and making you feel good because you thought that too. In fact, it can be a very valuable coaching tool at times to review one of those assessments and invite your client to comment on the things that they don't feel are relevant to them, applicable to them, and ask them why. And have them explore them further and determine how much better they feel about themselves when they've done that. But yes, that word depend on, I will leave this hoping I can depend on you all not to depend on them going forward, please. Joss?
Yeah, I have a similar caution around them, but I have to say that I really enjoy using them more as a measure of where and I use them on myself, where I am right now. So in our work, we come across people who say, oh, I've discovered Working Genius, or I've discovered DISC, or I've discovered something. And John and I and a couple of our associates are variously, what's the word I want, certified to use some of these tools. And we do use them, but in very limited capacities and for very specific purposes. I would say that, Working Genius is a great one if you want to really test the energetics of a team, for example. And, I happen to like innovation and I've got a very good sense of discernment. But if you want me to galvanize a team into action, forget it, I won't. I can do it, but I don't like to do it. John has his own particular set, and between the two of us, we're actually missing a couple, which sometimes we have to invite a third person in to provide, depending on what we're doing. So we use it for that, for designing a course of action, as opposed to a starting point. And it also helps me understand that, you know, again, as I said before, I like building things. I'm not good at maintaining something. I can design lots of things and build lots of things, but if you want me to maintain it, yeah, well, it's not going to happen unless it breaks, and then I'll just redesign
it. Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I noticed that Khaled put an interesting comment in the chat about definition of values. Is there something there that we can learn from, Khaled? Are you still with us? I looked in the names here. Oh, maybe, yes, here we go. Yeah.
Yeah, he's there. When you replace a typical, there's no better end. I'd like to hear more about this.
Khaled?
Right. Yeah.
Khaled Hamid.
No, wasn't me. Was a different Khaled.
I think it was Khaled Hamid.
Yeah.
Khaled, you've just come back, Khaled Hamid. We were talking about your comment in the chat about values. Anything else you'd like to share around that? Maybe he can't speak out right now.
Here he is. Yeah, here he is.
Yes, hello. Sorry, I have trouble in my computer. I'm Khaled from Cairo, Egypt. Really, I have trouble. So sorry.
Don't worry.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm so sad because I lost the whole session. But let me share something I have in my experience. Actually, I am a pro coach actually since 5 years ago, and also I contacted in the coaching more than 10 years right now. Actually, I also facilitator by WPAX since 2018. I noticed in coaching, actually, the coach must know more about all topics for coaching. All topics, it's very necessary for everyone. That make the behavior of coaching very well. There is many topics. There is no end for learning. That's about my experience. Still working and still learning a lot. No end. Thank you.
Thank you, Khaled. We didn't quite get the end there. It may be to do with the connection, but thank you for sharing with us. So our time's coming to a close shortly. I've got one question. What's your biggest learning about yourselves and yourself in relationship through co-leading? Joss and John.
For me, mine is to be okay with how incredibly flawed I can be and how incredibly human I can be most of the time. That's, I think, the biggest learning, and to be forgiving of myself first and foremost, of my perceived imperfections, and as I perceive them, and be grateful for the feedback that I get that makes me a better person. So those are the things I've learned through co-leading. Strangely enough, is a lot more, doesn't sound like it, but a lot more humility for myself, about myself. And in the co-lead itself, the thing I've really learned to love is I love working with somebody else. I think it's one of the coolest and greatest accomplishments is to be able to work with somebody else at the level that really inspires both my partner, myself, and others. Like, to me, that's the best thing.
That reminds me, Joss, how many times through our work on the Parachute project, where we've worked with the co-lead pairs who've approached us for support. And I think we've worked with something in excess of 350 pairs now. How
500.
500 page. Okay, whatever. Yes, thank you.
A lot.
The enormous majority of them who at the end of their time, at the end of their project, at the end of the experience that they have co-created and shared with a group of people that they have brought together, how often they say, oh my God, I never want to have to do this by myself again.
Yeah.
I would always want to work with somebody else as a partner because of the richness of the experience that they discover is available to them as co-leaders. I think that's the biggest impact that I've noticed.
Claire, what about you? Why don't you and Samira answer that question too? What have you two learned from co-leading, both about yourselves and about co-leading itself?
For me, I was just reflecting on that, and it's a person. There is Samira who has her style. That's what I learned about myself. And then there is Claire who has her style, and there is us together. We have our style. It's like a third person or agencies there. And we are both aware of that agency. And that's what I've learned from co-leading, that we create something totally different together as opposed to doing it separately. And I enjoy that, Claire. High five for you. Here we go. Yep.
I'm dyslexic. I wasn't good at that one. I think add into that just the energy and how much I love co-leading. And it's almost like something's missing when I'm leading training or team coaching on my own after doing so much co-leading. So, but the other thing is just learning about myself in terms of the way I am in relationships and mirrors there that happen in other relationships as well. I suppose we haven't got time, but wouldn't it be a really interesting question also, the way we've shifted as a co-leader over the years compared to how we used to be? That's a fabulous inquiry, and I wonder if the other co-lead could answer that even better than ourselves.
Yeah. Wonder that great takeaway for everybody, just to consider who you are now versus who you were when you started co-presenting, co-leading, co-coaching. You know, what have you discovered about yourself? What do you feel proud of? You know, in it as something that you've developed, and what's the gift that you bring to a partnership?
That's a perfect question. That's a really great question. What is the gift that you bring? Ideally, you ask your partner that question and you share your response to their question as well. Here's what I think you bring. You might find it's quite surprising for the two of you the very first time you have that conversation.
Yeah,
absolutely. So we have a little surprise. If anyone wishes to step into co-leading with someone in this group, email me. I'll put my email in the chat, and we will just choose you randomly, and we invite you to co-lead and share on, you know, #CoachMe how the co-lead went. By all means, we can advertise it in our community. There's no obligation at all, and if anyone would like to, then do email me. Oh, there we go. Samira's done it already. So we'll see where that takes us. And thank you so much, Joss and John, and especially John when you're on vacation as well, and you've joined us from your vacation place in Manchester. We appreciate everyone being here. We are doing a session down the line for those that are new to co-delivery. And actually, I'm thinking if any of you want to attend, you know, we can sit back and we can share and we can help them to lean in and discover more about themselves and be brave stepping into co-leading. So if you wish to attend that one, you're very welcome as well. Really appreciate your time. John and Joss, what is your closing advice for us all on co-leading?
Ooh, it's never, yes, what I'll do is I'll turn that right around. It's never closed. It's always open for whatever is new. It's never finished. It's never over. It's never done with. You might just take a break for a moment before you start again with another co-lead. But think, when you leave this session today, you are going to be with other people. Who are you co-leading with when you take on that new role of, or that take back that role that you left when you came into this meeting and you're going back to right now? How might you consider co-leading differently for a different outcome with whoever that is?
Yes, I like that. That's really cool. Take away. I don't think I can top that, John.
Wow.
Do we all take that one away then?
Yeah. Yeah. Other than be yourself, really be the self that you are, and know that who you are is already enough. You don't need to be more, just bring what you have and design with it, and it will be enough.
And I'll just add to that, and with that authenticity, it's okay to make mistakes. There's someone else there with you.
Hello, yes.
And you lean in and support each other. Thank you, everyone. Really enjoyed this session. It was different. It was a bit unusual, exciting topic, and see you on our future calls.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Good
Bye
night.
bye.
Everyone, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.